I didn't know the same parents who put me out at 15 would come back 20 years later with a lawsuit and a smile like we were overdue for a family hug. They told me to get out on a Tuesday, right after dinner, like it was a chore they'd finally checked off. My mama didn't raise her voice. That was the part that stuck with me. She just folded her napkin real neat, like she always did, and said, "You made grown decisions, so you can go live grown somewhere else." My daddy kept his eyes on the TV, some rerun humming in the background, the laugh track cutting through the room while my whole life cracked open. I remember the smell of fried onions still hanging in the kitchen, the clink of his spoon against the bowl, and my baby pressing against my ribs like she knew something wasn't right. I was in 10th grade, still worried about geometry quizzes, and suddenly I was being told to pack a bag. I said, "Mama, I'm scared," and she didn't even flinch. She just nodded toward the hallway like she was directing traffic. You should have thought about that. That sentence landed harder than any slap could have. I stood there, my hands on my stomach, feeling stupid for thinking there was room for mercy. I grabbed my backpack, the same one with my honor roll patch still stitched on crooked, and I walked out before my daddy ever looked at me. The front door closed soft behind me, like the house didn't want to make a scene. I slept on my cousin Rochelle's couch that night, her mama fussing under her breath, but still bringing me a blanket. Rochelle texted everybody before midnight. Black families move fast with information when there's mess involved. By morning, half the aunties knew I was pregnant and hard-headed, and the other half knew I was brave but said it like a warning. Nobody called my parents out loud. They just said things like, "You know how your mama is," as if that explained exile. The years after that blurred together in a way that still surprises me. I finished high school pregnant, waddling across the stage while my name echoed and my parents' seats stayed empty. I learned how to stretch a pack of diapers and how to smile through people saying, "You're so strong," when what they really meant was, "I'm glad it's not me." I worked at a call center, then a dentist's office, then finally landed a steady job at a logistics company where my supervisor liked to say I was dependable but never leadership material. I raised my son, Malik, with help from whoever showed up, which wasn't my parents. They never came to birthdays, never asked for school pictures, never showed up to graduations or football games. Sometimes I'd see my mama in the grocery store aisle, and we'd both pretend the cereal was suddenly fascinating. My daddy drove past us once when Malik was about 8. He slowed down, nodded like I was a neighbor, then kept it moving. That hurt worse than the silence. Malik noticed. Kids always do. He asked me one night while I was oiling his scalp, my fingers moving through his hair, "Why don't your parents like us?" I swallowed hard and told him some grown folks don't know how to love right. By the time Malik turned 20, I thought we were finally past the part of our story where other people got to hurt us. He was in college on a partial scholarship, working part-time, still calling me every Sunday like clockwork. I had my own apartment, my little routines. My plants I kept forgetting to water. Life wasn't soft, but it was ours. Then the letter came. It showed up in a plain white envelope, no return address, just my name typed too formally for junk mail. I opened it standing at the counter, the hum of the fridge filling the quiet. My hand started shaking halfway through the first page. Legal language does that to you. It said my parents were filing a civil suit against Malik, claiming he was in possession of property that belonged to them, property they alleged had been unlawfully retained. I laughed at first, a sharp sound that surprised me. Then I read it again, slower. They were accusing my son of theft. I called Malik immediately. He answered breathless, like he'd been running. "Ma, I was just about to call you," he said. My stomach dropped. He got in one too. We met that weekend at my place, papers spread across the table, my spice cabinet rattling every time someone upstairs walked too hard. Malik looked older in that moment, his jaw set, his eyes scanning lines of text like he was already tired of fighting. He told me it was about the old house, the one my parents still lived in. Apparently they were claiming he'd taken documents, maybe a deed, maybe something else. It didn't make sense because Malik hadn't set foot in that house since he was a toddler, not unless you counted driving past it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call my mama and ask her what kind of sickness made her reach for my child like that. Instead, I sat there rubbing my temples, thinking about all the times I protected my parents' peace by staying away. All the holidays I swallowed my pride. All the silence. And now they were dragging my son into court. Word traveled fast, like it always does. Rochelle called first, her voice low and sharp. Your parents done lost they mind, she said. They suing Malik? Over what? She said the family group chat was on fire. Aunties acting confused in that way where they're not confused at all, just gathering details. Somebody said my parents were standing on principle. Somebody else said, it's sad when family go this far. Nobody said they wrong, not out loud anyway. A week later, I got a text from my mama. Just one sentence. We need to talk. No apology. No explanation. I stared at my phone until the screen went dark. Malik watched me from across the room, his eyebrow lifting like he already knew. I told him I'd handle it. That's what I always did, even when it cost me. We met at a diner halfway between our neighborhoods, neutral ground like we were negotiating a ceasefire. My mama showed up pressed and put together, her hair wrapped neat, her purse clutched close. My daddy slid in behind her, same quiet presence, same refusal to meet my eyes. The waitress poured coffee, and for a second it felt like any other family meeting, except it wasn't. Mama didn't waste time. We didn't want it to come to this, she said, stirring her coffee like she was trying to hypnotize it. But that boy has something that don't belong to him. I asked her what exactly she thought Malik had. She said some papers, something he got from my grandmother before she passed. That made my chest tighten. My grandmother had been the only one who still called me baby after everything. She'd slipped Malik an envelope years ago, told him to keep it safe. I'd never asked what was inside because I trusted her. Daddy finally spoke then. We're just trying to protect what's ours. His voice was steady, like he was talking about lawn equipment, not my child's future. I told him Malik hadn't stolen anything. Mama's lips thinned. You always take his side, she said, like that was a flaw. Like that wasn't my job. The conversation went nowhere. We left with the same distance we'd arrived with, except now it was heavier, edged with legal threats. Outside, the sun felt too bright. My mama hugged me stiff, whispered, this didn't have to be ugly. Like she wasn't the one sharpening knives. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the past, looking for the moment where I'd misunderstood them, where I'd imagined their cruelty. I thought about being 15, standing in that hallway, about my daddy's spoon clinking against his bowl. I realized something then, something quiet and cold. They hadn't disowned me because I got pregnant. They'd disowned me because I didn't disappear. Malik hired a lawyer with money we scraped together, help from Rochelle, and a couple cousins who suddenly found their voices. The lawyer was calm, thorough, asked about my grandmother, about any documents, about the family dynamics. Saying it all out loud felt like dumping a junk drawer onto a clean desk. Embarrassing, but necessary. As the court date loomed, the family pressure ramped up. Aunties calling to say, maybe y'all can settle this privately. Uncle saying, you know your parents' old school. Translation, be quiet, take it, don't rock the boat. Malik stayed steady, but I could see the strain in his shoulders, the way he clenched his jaw. I hated that I couldn't shield him completely. The night before the hearing, Malik handed me the envelope my grandmother had given him. It was worn, corners soft. I think it's time you see this, he said. My hands trembled as I opened it, the paper inside thick and official looking. I didn't read all of it then. I didn't need to. I just knew, deep in my bones, that whatever was in that envelope was the reason my parents had suddenly remembered my name. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised out of spite and love and sheer will. I thought about how far we'd come, how much we'd survived. Whatever they were trying to take from us, I wasn't giving it up quietly. If my parents wanted a fight, they were about to learn I'd been training my whole life without even knowing it. I tucked the envelope back inside, kissed Malik's forehead like I used to when he was little, and told him to get some rest. Tomorrow, everything was going to change. If I had known what was really sitting inside that envelope, I would have slept better that night and walked into that courtroom with my head even higher. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before my alarm. The sky still dark, my apartment quiet in that way that makes your thoughts loud. I stood in the bathroom rubbing shea butter into my hands, the scent grounding me. and stared at myself like I needed confirmation that I was really here. That 15-year-old girl who got put out with a backpack and a swollen belly would not have believed this moment. She wouldn't have believed I'd still be standing, still fighting, still protecting my child from the same people who failed to protect me. Malik knocked on the door, already dressed, tie slightly crooked. He looked nervous but composed, that same calm he'd had as a kid when he was pretending not to be scared. I straightened his tie with muscle memory, smoothing his collar, and told him we'd be fine even though my stomach was doing gymnastics. We rode to the courthouse in silence, the kind that's not awkward, just heavy with anticipation. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cleaner, a mix of authority and neglect. My parents were already there when we walked in. My mama sat up straight, hands folded, her face set like she was attending church instead of trying to take something from her grandson. My daddy stood beside her, nodding at people he recognized, avoiding my eyes like always. When Malik sat down, my mama looked at him and smiled, a tight little thing that didn't reach her eyes. That smile made my chest burn. Our lawyer, Ms. Patel, leaned over and whispered that we were ready. She reviewed the documents Malik had, the envelope from my grandmother, and she was calm in that way people get when they know something you don't. That helped more than she probably realized. When the judge came in, everything got quiet fast. The case was called, names read out like we were just another number. My parents' lawyer spoke first, laying out their claim with polished words and rehearsed concern. He said Malik had withheld property of significant value, that he'd acted improperly, that my parents were simply seeking what was rightfully theirs. Listening to him talk about my son like he was some criminal made my hands curl into fists. Then it was our turn. Ms. Patel stood, voice steady, and said we denied the claims. She said there was documentation that directly contradicted my parents' accusations. When she mentioned my grandmother by name, my mama shifted in her seat. It was subtle, but I saw it. I'd spent my whole childhood learning to read that woman's micro-expressions. The judge asked for the documents. Malik handed them over, his hands steady even though I knew his heart was racing. The clerk took them, passed them up. The judge read quietly, flipping pages, his face neutral. Every second felt stretched thin. Finally, he looked up. These documents appear to be a valid trust and deed, he said. Executed several years ago. My mama inhaled sharply. Daddy finally looked at me then, real confusion flickering across his face. Miss Patel explained that my grandmother had established a trust, placing the house and surrounding land into it, naming Malik as the beneficiary upon her passing. She said the trust was created after my parents had tried to pressure my grandmother into changing her will. She said the documents had been legally filed and notarized, that Malik had done nothing wrong by holding on to them. The room felt like it tilted. I looked at Malik, his eyes wide now, shock mixing with relief. I hadn't known the full details either, not until that moment. My grandmother hadn't just given him papers. She'd given him protection. My parents' lawyer objected, tried to argue intent, tried to question my grandmother's state of mind. The judge shut that down quickly. He asked my parents if they had evidence to dispute the validity of the trust. They didn't. They just had assumptions and entitlement. The judge ruled in Malik's favor. Case dismissed. He even cautioned my parents about filing frivolous lawsuits in the future. Hearing that felt like oxygen rushing back into my lungs. My mama stood up too fast, her chair scraping loud against the floor. She looked at Malik like she was seeing him for the first time, like she was recalculating something. Daddy's shoulders slumped, age suddenly catching up to him. For a second, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Outside the courtroom, the family gathered like spectators after a game, everyone suddenly very interested in our faces. Aunties whispered. Cousins raised eyebrows. Rochelle hugged me so tight I almost cried right there. Malik laughed, a shaky sound that broke the tension. I held his face in my hands and told him how proud I was, how strong he was, how none of this was his fault. My mama approached us in the hallway. People quieted without even realizing they were doing it. She cleared her throat. We didn't know about all that, she said, gesturing vaguely, like the truth had just fallen from the sky and surprised her. I asked her if she knew my grandmother had set up the trust because she was worried about me and Malik. Mama didn't answer that. Instead, she said, "You could have told us." I laughed then. I couldn't help it. It came out bitter but honest. "You put me out at 15, I said, keeping my voice low. "You didn't want to know anything about my life. You don't get to show up now and say we should have told you." Daddy opened his mouth like he might argue, then closed it. For once, he had nothing. We walked away from them, the weight lifting with every step. In the car, Malik finally let himself exhale fully. "So, I own Grandma's house?" he asked, disbelief coloring his voice. "Looks like it," I said, smiling through tears. I thought about my grandmother then, her soft hands, her sharp mind, the way she'd always slip me grocery money even when I insisted I was okay. She'd seen everything. She'd planned for this. Over the next few weeks, the fallout rolled through the family like a slow wave. Some folks apologized for doubting us. Some stayed quiet. A few tried to spin it like my parents were victims of misunderstanding. I didn't engage. I was tired of explaining myself to people who'd already decided who I was. Malik visited the house with the lawyer to handle the paperwork. He asked me to come with him. Standing on that porch again after all those years felt surreal. The paint was peeling. The yard was overgrown. It looked smaller than I remembered. I realized then that the house had never really been home. The love my grandmother gave us mattered more than the walls ever did. Malik decided not to move in right away. He talked about renting it out, using the income to finish school without working so many hours. Listening to him plan his future, unburdened by fear, made everything worth it. That was the real inheritance. My parents tried to call a few times after that. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened, my mama sounded tired. She talked about family, about forgiveness, about how things went too far. She never said sorry. She never acknowledged the harm. I deleted the messages. One Sunday afternoon, I sat on my couch, Malik stretched out on the floor studying, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on other people behaving right, but the solid kind that comes from knowing where you stand. I thought about how my parents disowned me because they thought shame would break me. Instead, it built something in me they never had. I protected my son the way I wish someone had protected me. I broke the cycle, not with speeches or drama, but with consistency and love. Malik looked up from his books and said, "You okay, Ma?" I smiled at him, really smiled. "Yeah," I said. "I am." And in that moment, I knew my grandmother's real gift wasn't the house or the land. It was the proof that someone saw our worth long before the rest of them tried to sue it out of us.